Number 1.
Bynum was last seen at the San Franciscan Bar and Grill at 3rd Street and Runnels Street in downtown Big Spring, Texas, at 2 a.m. August 15, 2003. He reportedly left the bar with another man who has not been identified, and his truck was later in the bar's parking lot. Bynum has never been heard from again. He was reported missing later that same day. His relatives, who all live in Big Spring, say his disappearance is uncharacteristic of him. He had a lunch appointment with his brother-in-law August 15, but never showed up. He is not believed to have been carrying much money on his person at the time of his disappearance. Many rumors have circled about Bynum's disappearance, but none can be substantiated by police. He has not used his cellular phone or credit cards or withdrawn any funds from his bank account since his disappearance. He is described as a cheerful, outgoing, trusting man. At the time of his disappearance, Bynum was employed as a bartender with the Big Spring Fraternal Order of Elks, and he rode Harley-Davidson motorcycles in his spare time and belonged to the local motorcycle club. He is childless and has never been married, but he was close to his father, stepmother and siblings and called them several times a week. They have not heard from him since his disappearance. Foul play is suspected in Bynum's case, though when police examined his home they could not find evidence of bloodstains. He is considered endangered, and his family members believe he is dead.
Number 2.
Byrd was last seen in Tyler, Texas on May 27, 1992. She has never been heard from again. She left food cooking on the stove in her house when she vanished. There were no indications of forced entry. Authorities believe Byrd's disappearance could be related to the murder of a local 8-year-old boy, Ernest Chadwick "Chad" Choice. Chad was kidnapped from his bedroom in November 1991. 2 days later, a ransom note was found at his uncle's workplace. The family tried to deliver the money at a bus station, as per the instructions in the note, but no one showed up to collect it. Chad's family got an anonymous phone call saying he had been abducted to collect on a debt his uncle owed to 3 Colombian drug dealers. On the 1-year anniversary of his abduction, Chad's mother found another note left on her car windshield. The note said Chad was still alive and demanded $6,000 for his return. The alleged kidnappers never made contact with his family again. In 1995, on the 4th anniversary of the abduction, Chad's skull was left in a grocery bag on his uncle's front porch. Patrick Horn ultimately led authorities to the rest of the body and was convicted of the child's murder in 1997. Horn, a friend of Chad's older brother, was only 17 years old at the time of Chad's abduction and murder. He said the 3 Colombian drug dealers had abducted and shot Chad and that he was not involved in the crime and only disposed of the body because he was in fear for his life. At the time of his conviction in Chad's case, Horn was already serving life in prison without parole for carjacking and bank robbery. He was sentenced to death for Chad's murder, but his sentence was commuted to life imprisonment due to his age at the time of the crime. His statements about the alleged drug dealers have never been verified, and no one else was ever charged in Chad's case. Investigators stated Horn had been a suspect in Byrd's disappearance since shortly after she vanished. They believe she may have known something about Chad Choice's murder and was killed as a result. Christopher Wells, an associate of Horn's, may have helped move Byrd's remains, but he hasn't been charged in her case. Her disappearance remains unsolved.
Number 3.
AJ and his sister Marisha were last seen in Goliad, Texas on September 6, 1958. They lived with their mother, Jewel Bernay Campbell. The children's father, AJ Campbell Sr., took them for a ride and never returned them. Photographs of both the children's parents are posted with this case summary. They had been married for 8 years and AJ was very abusive towards Jewel. She took the children and left him, supporting herself with a teaching job in Goliad, Texas. AJ Sr. had court-ordered visitation times with them on Saturdays, and it was during one of those visits that they disappeared. He took them at 9 a.m. and was supposed to bring them back by 3 p.m. William Randall Jr., an acquaintance of AJ Sr., was the last person to see the children besides their father. Randall stated he and AJ Sr. picked up the children in Goliad, then drove away in Randall's two-door pink and charcoal gray 1955 Chevrolet Tudor with the Texas license plate number MA 9996. They went through Cuero, Texas and Gonzales, Texas, stopping along the way to pick up 2 large cans of lard. When they were about 3 miles outside Goliad, AJ Sr. asked Randall to stop because he wanted to see a friend. Randall stopped and got out of the car, and AJ drove on without him, with both children inside the vehicle. About 30 to 40 minutes later, AJ returned to pick Randall up. The children were no longer with him. He said he'd gone to visit his brother-in-law, but they had a fight, and he wound up leaving the children with another relative. AJ seemed nervous and agitated at the time, asked if he had any blood on him, and warned Randall to tell no one about the fight. They drove to San Antonio, Texas and then separated. AJ was supposed to meet Randall at a bus station at midnight the next day to return the car, but he never showed up. Randall took a bus to Fort Worth, Texas, and then reported his car as stolen. The following day, AJ Sr. spoke to a Fort Worth, Texas minister on the telephone that day and implied that he had killed his children, saying they were at rest with the world and that he was going to kill himself. Early on September 7, AJ Sr.'s body was later found inside Randall's vehicle on a rural road near Austin, Texas. His death was ruled a suicide. He had shot himself in the head with a new 16-gauge shotgun. He left a note addressed to Jewel. The note said he had buried both children and that he loved the children and he loved Jewel and hoped she would be happy. There was no indication of the children's whereabouts and no trace of them could be found. Jewel remarried after AJ's death and took the name Robertson and had 2 more children. She died in 2013. Her children by her second marriage, Regina Mainig and Phil Robertson, have been active in the search for AJ Jr. and Marisha and hope that they may be located. They believe there's a chance that the children are alive and AJ Sr. gave or sold them to someone instead of killing them. The bodies of Marisha and AJ Jr. have never been found and their cases remain open.
Number 4.
74 years ago, on a hot June morning, Virginia Carpenter left her home in Texarkana by train and arrived that evening at the campus of her new college, Texas State College for Women, in Denton. The last person to, reportedly, have contact with Carpenter was the taxi driver who transported her from the train station to the steps of her new dormitory on campus. However, Carpenter never checked into her dorm, nor showed up for the first day of class, and was never seen again. 21-year-old Mary Virginia Jimmy Carpenter was described by those who knew her as likable, beautiful, and happy. She was looking forward to her new adventure as a lab technician student at Texas State College for Women, now Texas Women's University. The taxi driver who delivered her to Brackenridge Hall on June 1, 1948 at 9 p.m. claims that upon getting out of his taxi, he observed Carpenter walk up to a light-colored convertible, parked just outside the dorm, and converse with the 2 male occupants as though she knew them. The identity of these 2 men remains a mystery. On June 4, Carpenter's boyfriend, Kenny Branham of Dallas, called her mother because he had been unable to get a hold of her since she left for Denton. This worried Mrs. Carpenter, who then called local authorities and reported Virginia missing. Initially, the taxi driver, Edgar Ray Jack Zachary, was the prime suspect. Zachary's wife told police that he had been at home by 10 p.m. the night of Carpenter's disappearance. Zachary took a polygraph test in July of 1948, which he passed. However, years later, Zachary's wife told authorities that she had lied about her husband's whereabouts that evening and that he didn't return home until 2 or 3 a.m. the following morning. Zachary was charged with an unrelated attempted rape in 1957. Although never charged in connection with Carpenter's disappearance, Zachary later passed a second polygraph test and died in 1984. In 1959, a box of human remains was recovered in Jefferson, Texas, about 200 miles from Denton. In the box were bones and a skull from a female who was the same height as Virginia Carpenter. Interestingly, the bones displayed a deformity that Carpenter also had. One of her legs was shorter than the other. However, this lead came to a screeching halt when dental records from the skull failed to match those of Carpenter. In May 1998, A man in his 70s came forward, claiming to know who killed Carpenter and where her body was buried. This man claimed that Carpenter's body was buried on the grounds of Texas State College for Women. The grounds were excavated, but nothing was found to support this theory, and the two individuals named as the killers were long deceased. Many who are familiar with the case of Virginia Carpenter feel she may have been a victim of the Phantom Killer of Texarkana. This serial killer attacked 8 people in the Texarkana area, 5 of whom were killed. Of these victims, Virginia Carpenter knew 3. The Phantom Killer was never caught. Some researchers believe the murders were the work of Yowell Lee Swinney, who was never charged with any of the crimes. On June 9, 1955, Mary Virginia Carpenter was declared legally dead under Texas civil law. Carpenter's mother spent much of the remaining years of her own life chasing down leads and helping police to learn more about the case. Mrs. Carpenter tended to cycle between hopeful periods of believing that her daughter had suffered amnesia and wandered off to start a new life, or, in darker moments, that her daughter was, in fact, dead. Mrs. Carpenter died in 1980 without the answers in her daughter's disappearance for which she had hoped.
Number 5.
Rogelio lived with his parents and younger sister in the 3500 block of West Woodlawn Avenue in San Antonio, Texas, at the time of his June 29, 1975 disappearance. He disappeared while on a fishing trip with several people. His girlfriend, Betty Jean Witherspoon, his girlfriend's friend, Ana Maria Ayala, Anna's parents, her uncle, her boyfriend, Nick Diaz, and Nick's sister. They had told Rogelio's parents they were going to Corpus Christi, Texas, but went to Bay City instead. Rogelio didn't tell his parents about the change in plans, which is uncharacteristic of his behavior. Betty Jean and Anna stated they went swimming with Rogelio off Matagorda Beach, 2 miles from the mouth of the Colorado River, when they all got swept about 300 yards offshore and caught in an undertow. The girls were rescued, but Rogelio disappeared, and an extensive search of the water turned up no sign of him. Rogelio had completed his freshman year at Central Catholic High School before his disappearance. He had a full-time job at Amigos Food Company, and he was learning how to drive. Authorities theorized he drowned and his body was swept out to sea, but his family never believed that. He was a good swimmer, and his mother and sister think he could have run away or possibly suffered an attack of amnesia and may still be alive. Rogelio's sister stated their father had a drinking problem, and he and Rogelio had a poor relationship, and suggests this could be a reason why he might choose to run away. Their father took his own life a year and a half after Rogelio went missing. His sister also stated he was seen in the local area after his disappearance by people who knew him. The family also got strange calls on many occasions after his disappearance. Sometimes they heard music at the end of the line, and on other occasions it sounded like someone was trying to talk. His mother and sister believes the calls were from Rogelio. Rogelio's case remains unsolved.
Number 6.
Chabarria was last seen in Arlington, Texas on April 1, 1997. He attended a meeting at approximately 6 p.m. at Harrigan's Restaurant, his place of employment. Chabarria was driving his partially primed, red-striped 1987 Honda Civic at the time. He has never been heard from again. Chabarria resided with a roommate in Arlington in 1997. He was reported as a missing person after his employer failed to contact him. Chabarria and his roommate had different schedules and did not see each other often. His roommate stated, however, that Chabarria had been drinking heavily at the time of his disappearance and was also sleeping for extended periods. Chabarria's mother had noticed he looked sick and asked him if he was using drugs, but he denied it. All of Chabarria's personal belongings, including clothing and toiletries, were left behind in his residence. Chabarria's vehicle was discovered abandoned on May 17, 1997, more than 1 month after his disappearance. The vehicle was located covered with mesquite in a brush-filled area on private property off of Farm Road 2119 in Culberson County, Texas. There was no sign of Chabarria at the scene. The keys were in the ignition, and the windows were rolled down. A shotgun box was in the backseat, and 6 empty bottles, a pack of cigarettes, an empty picture frame and 2 boxes of shotgun shells were scattered around. Authorities determined the shotgun that had been in the box had been bought at a Walmart in Bedford, Texas a few days after Chabarria disappeared, but they were unable to determine the identity of the purchaser. Chabarria's loved ones do not believe he was suicidal at the time of his disappearance and suggested he bought the gun for hunting. Chabarria's parents resided in the Fort Worth, Texas area in 1997. They stated it's uncharacteristic of their son to leave without warning. His maternal grandparents lived in the Pecos, Texas area in the past. His mother theorized her son may have driven to Culberson County to search for their former home. The theory has never been proven. Foul play is suspected in Chabarria's case, which remains unsolved.
Number 7.
On the weekend of September 23, 2007, Lisa Lee Chandler, 44, was feeling sick. She called her mother, Marie Johnson, to let her know and to chat about her life. "We talked all day, practically all day long," Marie told Dateline. She said the two were particularly close and that Lisa, a mother of 2 boys, was supposed to visit her and her husband the next day at their home in Starks, Louisiana, a 6-hour drive from Lisa's home outside Wolf City, Texas. "She was one of the best mothers that you could ever ask for," Marie told Dateline about her daughter Lisa. "She was a dang good person. She was always out there for the underdog." Lisa's oldest son Chris Chandler said growing up, he was close with his mother. "She was really involved with me and my brother's life," he told Dateline. Chris was attending Chipola College in Marianna, Florida in 2007. His younger brother Tyler lived there with him. According to Marie, her daughter Lisa was feeling particularly stressed that day because of her health issues and because she was going through a divorce. Over the phone, Lisa told her mother that she planned to go to the doctor the following morning before heading out for her parents' house. Marie said she had to end their call around 3 p.m. because she had plans. She called Lisa back at midnight to see how she was doing, but no one picked up the phone at the house. Worried about her daughter, Marie called her again at 6 a.m. the next morning. Again, no one picked up, which Marie said was out of character for her daughter. Marie called a friend of Lisa's and asked him to go over to her daughter's house. According to Marie, he said he could not get into the home because Lisa's protective dog was loose in the fenced area surrounding the house. Marie and her husband decided to drive from their home in Louisiana to their daughter's home to make sure everything was okay. Marie says the couple arrived around 1:30 p.m. When they arrived, they found Lisa's car was outside the house. Because the dog was used to Marie, she was able to get to the front door and found it unlocked. She went in and found all of Lisa's belongings including her purse, glasses, and cigarettes inside on a table. Lisa was nowhere to be found. "Everything was right there on the table," Marie told Dateline. "And she definitely wouldn't go nowhere without them cigarettes." Marie called a few of her daughter's friends, but none of them had seen her that day. She then called the Hunt County Sheriff's Office. Sergeant Jeff Haynes, lead detective on Lisa's case, told Dateline that officers were dispatched that afternoon on a welfare check to Lisa's home. He confirmed Lisa's home was unlocked, her purse was on the table, and her TV was on. He also does not believe Lisa made it to her morning doctor's appointment. "We're not ruling anything out on this case," Sergeant Haynes told Dateline. Lisa's case became a missing persons case when no one had heard from her 24 hours after she was initially reported missing to police. Ground searches were launched, and Lisa's sons Chris and Tyler immediately flew to Texas to help the search efforts on foot. Chris said it was a very overwhelming and confusing time for him and his brother. "There were suspicions, but we really focused on trying to locate her, trying to set those initial reactions aside and trying to find her," Chris told Dateline. Sergeant Haynes told Dateline that in the days following Lisa's disappearance, the Hunt County Sheriff's Office also used helicopter searches equipped with infrared heat searching technology, but the aerial searches were unsuccessful. They also used search dogs, which tracked Lisa's scent to about 5 miles away from her house before losing the trail. Over the past 11 years, Sergeant Haynes estimates police have searched close to 1,500 acres in the area surrounding Lisa's home. He says no one has used Lisa's name or social security number since she went missing. "I don't believe she left on her own accord," Sergeant Haynes told Dateline. "It's a very strange case. It's frustrating because we don't have any direction to go with this. We need community members to come forward with information." Lisa's disappearance has been heartbreaking for her mother. She believes Lisa may have left her home with someone she knew. "After 11 years, I would like to hear something," Marie told Dateline. "She's not some dog to be left out there." Chris says his mother's disappearance has been hard to deal with for both him and his brother. "It's been a rollercoaster. We're handling it in our own ways, but it has been rough. It affected a lot of aspects of my life," Chris said. "I really hope the police continue to use all the resources they have available to solve my mom's case." Lisa Lee Chandler would be 55 years old today. She is 5'6" with hazel eyes and brown hair. If you have any information about Lisa's disappearance, please contact Sergeant Jeff Haynes at 903-453-6809.
Number 8.
Charbonneau was last seen leaving the Baby Dolls strip club on the far east side of Fort Worth, Texas at approximately 3:41 p.m. on August 11, 2005. She was employed at the club as a dancer. Witnesses at the strip club stated she stumbled and fell down, as if she was under the influence, although it has not been established that she had actually drunk alcohol or taken drugs on the day of her disappearance. She had a history of drinking at work and getting too drunk to drive home. The management would call her a cab. When Charbonneau left Baby Dolls on the afternoon she disappeared, a customer, Daniel Glenn Moore, walked her to the door and carried her purse. By the time her taxi arrived to pick her up, she wasn't there. She has never been heard from again. Her dog and all her personal belongings were left behind. Charbonneau attended Denton Ryan High School in Denton, Texas, but did not graduate. She dropped out of school and got her GED instead. She had been working at the strip club for 5 years prior to her disappearance. She has a criminal history for driving while intoxicated. Charbonneau resided with her boyfriend in Euless, Texas in 2005. That city's police are investigating her disappearance. The week before her disappearance, she told her mother and said she and her boyfriend were going to marry and move to Wichita Falls, Texas. It was her boyfriend who reported her missing. Charbonneau paid for all her purchases with cash and did not have a bank account, credit cards or a cellular phone, making her difficult to track. Police initially believed she had left of her own accord and didn't thoroughly investigate the case, but they later concluded that foul play was involved. Charbonneau's family long suspected Moore, a married car salesman and the father of 2 children, was involved in her disappearance. They posted flyers in his hometown of Arlington, Texas, as well as on the internet, accusing him of killing her. A photograph of Moore is posted with this case summary. He was a regular customer at Baby Dolls. In February 2010, he was arrested and charged with Charbonneau's murder. Moore had been having an affair and, when his girlfriend saw the flyers that claimed he was involved in Charbonneau's disappearance, she confronted him about it. He allegedly told her he had accidentally killed Charbonneau. She told a friend, who went to the police in January 2010. When authorities questioned Moore's girlfriend, she confirmed the account about his confession. Police searched a Kendale, Texas house which belonged to a relative of Moore's, and they found a bullet hole in the headboard of a bed and a stain on the mattress that resembled blood. They were unable to obtain DNA from the stain for testing, however. It wasn't until December 2010 that the police presented their case to a grand jury. The jury declined to indict Moore, however, so authorities had to drop the charges against him. They had been unable to confirm Moore's girlfriend's story, and her statements had been a major part of the evidence against him. Authorities may attempt to bring the murder charge against Moore again in the future if more evidence resurfaces. Charbonneau is the oldest of 5 children in her family. One of her brothers died of cancer in childhood, and another died in a motorcycle accident in 2008, 3 years after her disappearance, but her parents, sister and surviving brother are still alive and continue to search for her. Her case remains unsolved and foul play is suspected due to the circumstances involved.
Number 9.
Childress was last seen in Henderson, Texas on October 13, 2015. She has never been heard from again. There were no signs of foul play at the trailer where she lived. A few days after Childress was reported missing, police found her car being driven by a man in Henderson. He was arrested on an unrelated charge and stated Childress had sold him the vehicle, something her family finds difficult to believe. Starting in mid-September 2015, about a month before Childress went missing, her sister, Patricia Nichols, began receiving strange Facebook messages from her. The first message said there was an emergency and Childress needed her phone number. 3 weeks later Nichols got another message that just said, "Sister, where are I? What's going on?" On October 6, Nichols got a voice message from Childress's Facebook account. The message said something about guardian angels, but the voice wasn't Childress's. Nichols left home after that and didn't return until November 6, by which time Childress was missing. 2 women contacted Nichols after Childress's disappearance and said they knew what had happened to her. The women stated Childress had been involved in using and selling drugs and gotten some bad people angry and was tortured and killed as a result. This information has not been verified. Childress was seeing Felipe Villanueva at the time of his disappearance. He is considered a person of interest in her case and has multiple warrants for his arrest on drug-related charges and driving without a license. His current whereabouts are unknown, and it's unclear whether he's still in the area. A photo of Villanueva is posted with this case summary. He was 35 years old in 2015. He's described as 5'9" and 210 pounds, with black hair and brown eyes. Childress also has a warrant out for her arrest, but she's considered a missing person rather than a fugitive. She has a prior arrest record for drug and alcohol-related offenses and probation violations. Nichols, who last saw her in August 2015, said she had just gotten off probation at the time and was trying to clean up her life. Her case remains unsolved and foul play is suspected.
Number 10.
Cloud was last seen in Splendora, Texas on October 25, 2016. She had recently moved in with her father, and he later claimed she left home to go on a blind date with an unidentified man she'd met online. However, this story was untrue. In fact, Cloud's father had asked her to leave following an argument. 2 men picked her up. One of them said he dropped her off safe later that night. Either shortly before or shortly after midnight on October 26, Cloud's Facebook account accepted friendship requests from 2 men. She was active online in the early morning hours of October 27, searching for friends on Facebook and search terms on Google. She was apparently traveling between Conroe, Texas and Houston, Texas, but her trail ended in the Westchus area of Houston just after 1 a.m. on October 27. She has never been heard from again. Prior to her disappearance, Cloud had an abusive ex-boyfriend, and another man had threatened her. The ex-boyfriend has passed a polygraph in her case. She doesn't have any credit cards, and she left her car, money, identification and clothes behind. She also left a 3-year-old son. According to Cloud's father, their relationship was strained, but he didn't believe she would have abandoned her family. Her case remains unsolved.